Our second presentation is a $17,000 grant that we have given to the Newberry Library in Chicago entitled Preserving Chicago's Planning History, Digitization and Archiving. D. Bradford Hunt is going to explain that to us. Brad's also a member of Ely chapter, joined us this morning from Chicago. Brad is the Vice President for Research and Academic Programming at the Newberry. He's also going to explain to everybody what the Newberry is. It's a very important institution. He co-authored with John DeVries a book called Planning Chicago, so it's still available for holiday gifts. And his history of public housing in Chicago is really quite famous. It's called Disaster, the Unraveling of Chicago Public Housing. And he is now the president of the Society of American City and Regional Planning History. Brad, welcome, and tell us about the Newberry and what you're doing.
Thanks, John, and thanks to the Land Economics Foundation for this grant. I'm really excited about this project. And if I get carried away, John's hopefully going to rope me in a little bit. Let me tell you first about the Newberry Library. As John said, I'm a planning historian, but I help run the research side of the Newberry. We're a large, private, independent research library. We're free and open to the public. Anybody can walk in our doors and use any of our 1.5 million books or our extensive collections in the history of Chicago. We have a fabulous map collection. We do a lot in American history, European history. We also have one of the country's great collections of Native American material. But today I want to talk to you about our grant and our project we call Preserving Chicago's Planning History. So let me tell you the problem. John and I wrote this book on the history of post-war planning in Chicago. And what we realized was that the Chicagoans know an awful lot about one person, Daniel Burnham. And they think planning began and ended in Chicago with Burnham's famous 1909 plan. And so Chicago's planning history, we realized, is way too focused on Daniel Burnham, way too focused on that early era. And the work of Lambda members and other organizations is not well understood, not readily available, not understood even by students of planning, even at planning schools. And more importantly, it's not being preserved well. As we did our book, there were really we're one of only two books that have even tackled the problem of planning after Burnham. One is wonderfully titled Beyond Burnham, and I really like that title, and I think we're going to use it for our website, by Joseph Schwieterman and Alan Mimosa. And then John and our book, which focuses more on the city, Beyond Burnham focuses more regionally. So the amount of work done on Chicago's planning is not that extensive. As John and I did our book, we assembled an appendix. He assembled an appendix that kind of triggered this grant idea. We realized, what even are the plans that have been done since the 1950s in Chicago? We wrote up this list, and we started to realize, where are these things? And they're not readily available. So when John said, well, let's solve this problem. Let's start to build an archive of Chicago plans that will help, first of all, explain the work that's being done, and also start to explain the work done by many of the members of Lambda Alpha. So where are we? What were the goals of this grant? The goals were first to collaborate with our members to build a unique online resource on Chicago planning for planners, students of planning, and the general public. John and I do a lot of talks around town at University of Illinois Chicago and other places, and we realize that the students are really hungry for the things that we're talking about, yet they can't even find them digitally. To do this, we've got this project to digitize, build a website, and to start thinking about an archival collaboration that's going to preserve the work of planners in the late 20th century. This involves, to do this right, we got to professionally digitize these things. We've got to have a website that has context, not merely just putting these things up. And we need to explain this to the broader public and to others with symposium that will film as well, so that it can have live long past that presentation. And then we also are working on developing a systematic way to think about preserving the work of planners, developers, and others in the city who really have transformed it in the last 50 years. I'm a historian. I think historically. I think about long after all of us in this room are not here. We have people come to the Newberry desperate for material that's 80, 100, 200, 300 years old to understand what happened in places. And I think the transformation of American cities in the last 30 to 40 years is going to be one of the amazing stories in American history, with lots of successes, many mistakes, and it's a complicated story, and it's going to need archival material. And that's something that we hope to begin to think about in this grant. What's our work to date? We have collaborated with Ely chapter members, formed a working group to start to prioritize. What are the plans that are most significant? Where should we start with our digitization efforts? What are the significant plans that we ought to be talking about? We've done that work in a series of meetings. We've developed criteria and a list of plans for this early digitization. We've made already underway. I've got this website in beta. I'm going to share it with our group. We're going to talk about it, think it through. There were many challenges involved along the way that at first I thought this would be kind of easy. It's never easy to build a website that has, or to organize and curate, if you will, what's important and how to organize it. And finally, we have begun collecting some archival material. We have ingested the material. Ingest is kind of a word, sounds like lunch, doesn't it? Sorry. Yeah, Les Pollock, we've ingested Les Pollock, we've ingested Les Pollock's library, the Camaras Library, as well as material from Bob Teska. We've also met with Skidmore, Owings, and Merrill. Skidmore, Owings, and Merrill, one of the giant planning firms in Chicago in the late 20th century, and they have a library of material that we're looking at that would be really, I salivate over that as well. Wouldn't that be great to have this material available for researchers, available for people to want to understand the changes of the city? So here's a working spreadsheet. This is part of our list. We've got 100 plans. How are we going to prioritize it? We started to do that. Here's the beta of the website, calling it Beyond Burnham, Planning Chicago and the Reason in the 20th Century. Have to think about how we're going to organize all these plans so that we can grow over time, so it's not just 20. What if we eventually work our way up over time as this project continues to a couple hundred plans? So one of the first steps was thinking about buckets in which to put plans. There are comprehensive plans, there are regional plans, there are community plans, there are neighborhood plans. Sometimes those overlap. Maybe this is a set of criteria we want to think about. We can tag plans in this website in order for people to search in different ways. Started to build out, say, this community bucket and throw a bunch of plans in there. The plan of Evanston, 1917, a classic suburban plan post Daniel Burnham, done by Burnham's son. I want to show you the second one on the list, an opportunity for private and public investment in rebuilding Chicago, 1947. Nobody knows about this plan in Chicago, yet it is the forerunner of urban renewal on the south side. You cannot understand Chicago's south side. You cannot understand the built environment of the black community in Chicago without understanding that plan, which I'll show you here. We had it professionally digitized, Les's copy, in fact. This was really valuable. This is a beautiful plan done by a consortium of organizations that involved public and private organizations. And it's Walter Gropius from Harvard, the original dean of the Harvard Graduate School of Design, one of the early forefront of the post-war planning in Chicago, was the consultant. And it gets a little washed out here in the light, but really interesting graphically. I just picked out 2 pages of this 60-page report. And I'll zoom in here. The Michael Reese campus. This is all of this. Michael Reese, for those in Chicago today, know that this was a major question of how to redevelop a hospital campus that after its closure. And we still have an opportunity for public and private investment in Chicago in 2018. Here it is in 1947. So these documents are still very relevant to us today. I'm going to show you a couple more. I love this stuff. The Comprehensive Plan of Chicago. Another giant in the landmark plan in the history of the city, yet you cannot find a digital copy. It's hard to even find a complete set of this plan. And the last comprehensive plan, the last approved comprehensive plan of the city of Chicago, 1966. We haven't done a comp plan in, what is that now? Do the math, 52 years. This one is really interesting. I'm going to show you a couple of slides from this because I get interested in this as a planning historian. This is the Park Mall concept. It's a little hard to see, but those from Chicago know this is about recapturing Ogden Avenue, which was one of the Burnham plan, the 1909 plans, diagonals. It really wasn't working. This was an idea to recapture it. It's now part of the Old Town community in Chicago. If we do a land economics weekend in Chicago, again, I'd love to walk through that. I think that'd be a really cool tour. Anyway, yeah, you get a sense of this. These are interesting on multiple levels for people, not only planners, but any person who lives in the area might want to understand this, and we can make it available. We also have this comprehensive plan that we just digitized, the 1956 Regional Plan of Chicago. Big, beautiful plan, some fold-out maps and the like. This one's super significant because it recognized the strengths of the city's commuter rail network. That's displayed here. It also proposed a whole lot of roads that were going to end up getting built. Again, you can't understand Chicago's region without these documents, and they're not available. They're just not a lot of copies. They're not digitized. There's not context around them so people can understand their significance. That's what we're building. I also said we have to do this in a public way. This is a photo from the Newberry. We do lots of these kind of public engagement work, lots of public programming. We can have a terrific symposium. We put the people who worked on this project on the stage. We talk about it. We engage audiences around planning. We know that people are very interested in the city and how it's changed. We've done other programs like this, not on planning, but on how cities change over time. This really excites people. They don't realize that planners are an integral part of this and involved. They kind of know it vaguely, but most Chicagoans think the city changes because the mayor or whoever's in power wants it done. Mayors are important. That's certainly not the whole story. The people in this room certainly understand how difficult it is to transform communities. Let me show you, I'm going to put Les on the stage again here, not quite. These, again, we've ingested. This is what it's not digested, it's ingested. Portions of his library. This is the raw material. This is the stuff that future historians and even people today want to look at. This is about collecting the practice of planning by people in Chicago who do this work. And we think, there are major reports that do end up in the libraries, but there's a whole lot of data and these processes that we've heard about at Mount Vernon. These are really raw material that is essential for really understanding what happened. If we want to write these histories in a serious way, we've got to know this, got to have this material. Now, these are the boxes when they came in. It's going to take a lot of work to process. It's straight off the shelf, and then we figure out how to catalog it and all that. That takes a lot of work. And people have asked, if I give you something, when can you have it up on a website? Whoa, we got to step back. That's a lot of work. If you gave me your files, I'd say, well, it's going to take X number of hours, and it's going to be a lot of hours. And those are scarce resources. And also, space is scarce. The currency of libraries are space and time. And those things are how librarians measure this. And so, if I get really enthusiastic with our library staff, I'm on the research side, so I'm new to library stuff, and I say, we're going to get all these great collections. And they're like, okay, slow down, where are we going to put it, and what are we going to do, and how much is it, so these kind of things. So one of the ideas that we've had in conversation is to use what is called the Chicago Collections Consortium, which is a consortium of research libraries in the Chicago area that was developed by the Newberry, by our president, David Spatafora. He organized this group in 2014, and it's to get these research libraries to work together. So if one institution can't absorb all the material, maybe it makes sense to let several institutions absorb it and work together. There's no reason necessarily why it all has to be under one institution if it's about Chicago planning. If it's planning materials of a firm that did a lot of work in the suburbs, maybe it would go to a university in the suburbs or things like that. So those are the kind of ways to work together to do this right. Let me tell you about our next steps and future ideas, and then we'll take some questions. The next steps for us are to complete phase one. I think we're going to be close to that. I want to have this public launch of the website, and in the fall of 2018, want to collaborate on these protocols with the collection consortium. We're already started that conversation, and then do this symposium probably in the spring of 2019, in part because our building's under renovation, and so that seems to be the best time frame for that. And this is really exciting. I think it's going to be a part of a super conversation in the city about planning with Lambda Alpha members, Ely chapter members, in a way that will really energize people and get us thinking historically. Now, I'm a historian, and planners think in the future and building the future, great, but we've got to tell our own story well. And I think that's a part of this project. For the future, when I want to keep going with this, even if there's no more money from LEF, that's, I understand. We can build this website, continue to build it over time, and make this the go-to place for understanding the planning in Chicago. I think we can do things for schools. We already do some of this. One of our most important digital resources, the Newberry, is a thing called the Digital Collections for the Classroom. Teachers are always looking for visual material and support for how do I teach the American Revolution? Well, come to our site. How do I teach the history of Chicago and understand its plans and change over time? That's where we can be the place to go to. And then I think this could be a model, and it's never a one-size-fits-all. No planner would ever say that. But write up this project as an idea model for other cities, and in the lunch and before, there was certainly enthusiasm for saying, oh yeah, this feels like an enormous challenge. How are we going to preserve the history of San Diego, the planning and the firms that have worked on it? This could give some guidance, and I think in that respect it's good. Sorry. Thank you. Yeah.
That's a huge amount of data, a lot of work, but access to it is going to be made easier through technology as well. These documents are old. You're all going to be able to OCR.
Yeah, the question was about digitization, and can we optical character recognition, OCR, the plans so that they are searchable down to the word. Absolutely, and that is the quality of the digitization we're doing. We do this at the highest library standards of today, and we think those are going to be durable. Now, 50 years from now, it's hard to, we used to have PDFs that were kind of fuzzy and grainy, and Google did a whole bunch of books about 10 years ago, and if you look at those, they're not well done, frankly. If they were in color, they didn't do it in color. They didn't fold out the map. They didn't do the kinds of really high quality work that we're able to do, and I think that means that this will have staying power, and we can do it in a way that's absolutely searchable. It's not just taking the pictures, it's that metadata around the cataloging that also makes it findable.
Good. One more question, and Brad's, by the way, going to be with us through Friday night, so you'll have a chance to pick his brain.
Love talking about this stuff. Yeah.
Hard to tell. Okay, thank you very much.
Sorry, thank you.